Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. I'm joined today by Amor Maclang, who's a very important person in the fintech scene in both the Philippines and the whole ASEAN region. So, without further ado, I leave it to you, Amor, to introduce yourself and tell me and my listeners a bit more about your personal journey.
Buenos dias, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Good evening to everyone. Um, I want to start off by saying how I did not expect to be interviewed by the Dr. Oriol, nor expect to meet someone so young, right? So it's really a great testament to be speaking to one of the pioneers of fintech, especially of gift globally. So kudos to all the work that you're doing in the industry. So my name is Amor Maclang. I am a pioneering digital economies builder in ASEAN. But really, I refer to myself as an accidental leader in the space. And, it started in sometime in 2013. I was advising what was at that time the ninth largest, so not the largest, the ninth largest universal bank in the Philippines. And at that time, they had a book by a good friend of all of us, Brett King, I think at that time it was still Banking 2.0. Now it's already Banking 4.0 when I saw Brett in Bangkok. And they had this battle cry, which is digitalize or perish. And we created a lot of campaigns and programs. And I saw the power of both integrating, but at that time, the word fintech wasn't even crystallized at that time. That was sometime 2012, 2013, right? Wouldn't you say? I don't think the word was coined at that time yet.
No, I don't think so. Or at least if it was, it wasn't that commonly used as it is now.
Yes, correct. And the intent was really how do we promote a bigger digital economy? I know it wasn't articulated at that time yet, but we've always seen fintech not as a horizontal, not as a vertical, but rather as a horizontal, meaning it wasn't just about payments. It was about embedding fintech, say, for example, in logistics, and eventually it'll become logistics tech, right? So I've always had that radical idea, and thankfully it was supported by the father of fintech in the Philippines, who I'm happy to do a shout out for, Dr. Tito Ortiz, the former chairman of Union Bank and the current chairman of FinTech Philippines Association. And we had this crazy idea that fintech was for all, not from a poverty porn perspective, but rather from under-advocated pillars. For example, let me share with you a little bit about the ASEAN and also the Philippine market. Our average age is anywhere from 25 to 30 years old, right? Quite a young market, very mobile first. And we have something interesting about our market. We have a lot of gamers and gigsters. So whenever I do global keynotes, I say, what drives our economy? We love to shop via e-commerce. We're the fastest growing. We love to game, and we like to do gigs, right? However, despite the fact that we have a very robust gigster economy, and in the Philippines specifically, we have 2 million registered gigsters. So this doesn't even include the unregistered ones. Do you know, my dear friend, that to this day, they continue to be underrepresented in the financial services space? They can't take out loans. They don't have health insurance. They're not formally recognized in the financial services sector. I mean, look at the phenomena that is YGG, Axie Infinity, and the idea of play to earn, right? Which happened at the height of the pandemic. This was a beautiful coming together of two countries. So let me talk a little bit about these two amazing countries, Vietnam and also the Philippines. So Axie was birthed by Vietnam, but it was the Philippines with our superpower of technological mass adoption that took it and spun it into a different type of economy that married our two beautiful worlds of crypto and fiat, right? So people game the underprivileged, the marginalized game. They actually cashed in. It wasn't just about gaming for in-game skins, right? That make you look cool. This allowed for people in my country,
Very
especially
cool.
during the lowest point of the pandemic, to actually make real money. And you know, Oriol, how much it was at its peak? 1,400 US dollars. So we have all of these incredible stories that I'm happy to share with you about the Philippines as a microcosm of this incredible region. ASEAN, largest fintech, fastest growing fintech and e-commerce in the world.
No, I think you touched on some very interesting ideas, and you mentioned financial inclusion or the lack of financial inclusion, right? I think that's a big issue in many regions in the world. So I wanted to ask you a bit about that, right? How big an issue is it the lack of financial inclusion in Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia?
You know, it's good you mentioned these regions. And whenever I do keynotes, I talk about how ASEAN is this formidable mass, but we are not homogeneous. But let me take the tale of two countries. I was recently in my second Indonesia FinTech Summit. So special shout out to Pa Pandu, Pa Haryanto, Pa Aris. Incredible IFS. We're so privileged apparently to be the first country pavilion to ever set in Indonesia. I can't begin to tell you about Indonesia. You know, we have very similar journeys as a digital economy market. For example, between the two of us, Philippines and Indonesia, we already constitute close to 400 million people, which is 3/4 of ASEAN. And our journeys in financial inclusion are almost twin siblings of each other. Number one, we are net borrowers. We have a big opportunity to extend the digital lending space to more people, especially, second point, SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises. Being an archipelago, we actually have challenges with actually trying to connect the different islands in the different regions. We're also very highly mobile first. There's a running joke that I usually crack. It's getting old though. That for every Filipino born, there's already an attached active mobile line with our umbilical cord. And the reason for that is that we have 115 million Filipinos and 168. Can you imagine 168 active mobile phones? So most people have two phones. We transact most of our life, not just payments. But the reality is we still continue to be underrepresented. And it's not just about the access to bank accounts or wallets, my friend. Look at the issue of insurance, okay? In the case of insurance, the numbers are far more dismal than the banking than the banking sector. The coverage continued to be, I think still at a dismal 1 in 10 Filipinos. And in Digital Pilipinas, we recently rolled out a program together with several of our conveners, and our convener for InsurTech. Actually, let me share with you something that might be curious to many of your listeners in Europe. So while we, for insurance, we're very undercovered at 1 in 10 for life and wealth products. Guess what we like to protect and insure? Our mobile phones. So there was a I'll tell you. I know you're laughing, so let me explain
No, but
to you.
it makes sense. It makes sense.
It makes sense, right?
Makes
Listen to
sense.
these numbers. In under 1 year, this incredible partner of ours, Etika, one of the major players in ASEAN. Essentially, they sold rather digitally close to 15 million in under a year digitally for gadget insurance. So that tells you what, but instead of like saying, wow, does it mean that you guys don't care about your life? No, I mean, maybe a good entry point or a supposed gateway drug to financial inclusion would be things they care about, right? Maybe we have to introduce to them insurance for gamers and gigsters, or for things they care about, like gadgets. So it's such a quirky market, and I can't stop talking about it. So I'm going to turn it over to you, my friend.
No, I think it makes perfect sense. And you talked before about gaming as well. I think that's very interesting because I mean, even before the pandemic, I know that online gaming, and I'm talking about traditional gaming, is was something big in the Philippines. Like I know many people who are playing League of Legends, World of Warcraft in the
Mobile
Philippines.
Legends, come on, don't be afraid to admit if you play Oriol.
Oh no, I like video games very much, really. I mean, I really do. I've been like playing video games since a kid. So I mean, that's why the Philippines has always been interesting in that sense for me as well, because I know there are many gamers. But then during the pandemic, all these play-to-earn companies started, I think, to become much more mainstream. And I know that in the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia are some of the markets where those companies became like much more relevant, because it's what you said before, no? Like certain people are not maybe included enough in the financial systems, and this company allowed them to become much more included. And also, you mentioned before Digital Pilipinas, which I'm sure your listeners will be able to see here, no, the logo in just at your left. So I wanted to ask you, like, what's Digital Filipinas? What do you do there? And also related to that, how do the ecosystems of Philippines, Indonesia collaborate, interact based on your practical experience?
Of course. So there were a lot of categories that emerged with the burgeoning of the digital economies market. For example, I'm sure when we were all growing up, we never told our parents, Oriol, that one day we will become a social media manager, or that one day it's either your doctor like yourself, not a medical doctor. I would assume a PhD. You'd either be a PhD, a doctor, or a lawyer, right? But no one ever talked about things like community building, or data analysts, or digital economies builder. But what we've seen is the one of the biggest deterrent to mass adoption of really important critical technologies is, it's not about interoperability. It's the way people and organizations and governments in the private sector talk to each other. I just came from the planning session for 2024 with some of our conveners in Digital Pilipinas this afternoon. And you know what our champion for SME digitalization said? She said, when confronted with so many technologies, an SME would most likely default to what they usually know, which is Meta, TikTok, Instagram, and depriving themselves of the opportunity to take advantage of this plethora of almost free services, right, that you have at your disposal, from SaaS to payments, right, to certain platforms. What we've seen is that this gap in technologies can be mitigated if more groups, organizations, governments spoke to each other. And so that's kind of like what we do in Digital Pilipinas. Imagine a glue. Imagine a glue that helps pull everyone together, not just in active conversation, but because we do so much more. The first is actually to connect and converse. The second is actually to educate. The third is actually to help people land their first ever win via a go-to-market strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Get them a win in a market, right? Do a proof of concept. Help shape the legislative agenda so that innovation and also at the same time legislation can be at parity with each other. And with how so many things in the digital economy can get a bit hazy, we want to make sure that regardless of how uncertain things are, we always do the right thing, right? So it takes a lot of persuading and connecting and experimenting and succeeding and also failing, right?
Mhm.
But I think that's the reason why, um, you know, people like you and me, I would consider you one of the pioneering digital economies ecosystem builder in the world, right? And you've seen Asia at the front seat. Um, uh, it the more the more you have to promote technology, the more you have to connect as people. So just like last year, we talked about how we supported each other. We worked on the launch during the Singapore FinTech Festival of the One ASEAN FinTech movement, which is the coming together of the six markets, major markets. And I remember last year, I literally lost my voice in the last quarter because I made sure that we visited all the markets, even even and especially emerging markets, for example, like Cambodia. So
Mhm.
special shout out to our family in Camtech, from Wina to Remy to Thomas, who are championing not just Cambodia. And you know, there are a lot of incredible things that are happening in Cambodia.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Um, do you know that their Project Bakong? Oh my God, right?
Yes, yes.
I was last with them in Kigali, and in the IFF in Rwanda, and I wanted to make sure that the Cambodian voice was heard. So I said, Remy, you need to talk about the incredible work that you're doing there, especially now with our super progressive central bank governor. It's happening. And look at Vietnam for one thing, right? Not only is it one of the top three markets for crypto in the world after the Philippines and Nigeria. Oh, don't get me started with Africa because I love the connection that we've created between ASEAN and Africa. So special shout out to Dr. Aina and Dr. Patrick. What is about you and PhDs, right? It seems like all the leaders are doctors. Mine is just honorary, so it doesn't count. Um, but I'll tell you, literally, where one goes, we all go. Um, we recently celebrated our Digital Pilipinas festival, and
Mhm.
we had people like Dr. Patrick come down, Kito-san, who's like a brother to all of us. Okay, all of us. I always tell him he's not a Japan fintech leader, he's a global fintech leader, just like you. Um, and shout out also to Kito-san because it was he who opened my idea that Amor, don't just look at the major markets. We would talk about markets like Central Asia, even supporting potentially markets like the fintech community in Afghanistan, Iran, etc. Right? It's
Mhm.
that mindset that he has exposed me to, which is why in the second year of the Japan FinTech Festival, we all hope to see you there. Digital Pilipinas is the proud partner. There is no way we're not going to be there, and I hope you will be there as well, and all your listeners.
Looking forward to
um,
that event. I am.
Absolutely, right?
Mm.
But then let's bring it back to ASEAN. Indonesia, for me, is perhaps the most underrated leader. What they're doing, this is an example of a country that walks quietly but carries a super big stick. They launch a carbon exchange, right? Recognizing the need for it in the market. Uh, of course they're a leader in digital lending, and just the kind of um, incredible opportunity, the number of unicorns that have come out of Indonesia,
Mm.
right?
Huge.
We
Yes,
can't
yes.
even fathom. um, Thailand and the Philippines, we both have kind of a similar journey wherein our initial unicorns are actually corporate backed, right? CP Group, Globe, the Smart Group. But Indonesia has shown us that once you have one bootstrapping unicorn, then the rest will follow.
Mhm.
So we're all trying to follow and support and enable and learn and eat our way through Indonesia. I love it. And really great shout out to the leaders of OFTEC, and also very proud to say we recently sign with the Sharia. Pa Ronald, hello if you're listening. Um, with the Sharia FinTech Association, because if there's one thing that I hope all your listeners will learn about ASEAN is the importance of halal finance,
True.
right? I am not Muslim, but I am a big believer, just like Paharyanto. Hi, shout out to the president of Aladdin in Indonesia, that halal finance is not just for Muslims, but especially for the rest of the world.
I
There are
agree.
certain things they do, and 40% of ASEAN is actually Muslim and growing. So I always say the business of ASEAN is the business of halal, and the business of halal could be a leading force in ASEAN. And it's not yet there. For example, let's look at insurance. Super excited to be working on a cross-border pilot on Takaful insurance, which even if you are not Muslim, you and I are not Muslim, I think we would have to agree could be very much superior in certain fronts, right?
Yeah.
Just imagine. I mean, I'm no expert, and I'm a student. I think I'll never stop learning for you all. Uh, if we were to explain it to someone, if something happened to you, knock on wood, and you had DACA insurance, the principle of the thing is, instead of the money staying with the company, it goes back to the community and the family, right? So there, we talk halal, we talk cooperation, and of course, Malaysia and also Indonesia are big brothers when it comes to halal finance.
No, I fully agree. First of all, you mentioned before Cambodia and Project Bakong. I think it's interesting because I actually had on my podcast a couple of years ago Her Excellency Serei Chia from the National Bank of Cambodia, and we discussed
another rock star. Oh my God, another rock star in FinTech in ASEAN.
Yes, and I mean it's very interesting to see that because it shows you that even smaller countries can actually be creating like amazing things in the digital economy space, or even precisely because they are smaller, they have this need, no, to try to innovate even much more than the bigger ones. And then you talk now about Islamic finance as well. I think that's very interesting. I think so far in my podcast I have interviewed at least 4 or 5 people in this area talking about Islamic finance. I find it fascinating, and part of why I find it fascinating, aside from Islamic finance per se, is the idea that, I mean, we call it Islamic finance, of course, because it applies Islamic principles, but I think it's all about ethical finance. I mean, you could be talking as well about ethical finance instead of Islamic finance, and the idea would be pretty much the same. So I think the whole world is in need of much more Islamic finance, and I'm not talking from the religious perspective, right, but from the ethical perspective, and I think it brings like very interesting like ideas that could be applied globally.
Mashallah is all I can say to you. Thank you. Thank you so much for recognizing that. And, you know, Oriol, if you don't mind, as I was recently in Cape Town, I was sent over the government of India because I have this almost obsessive desire to learn about Indian digital public infrastructures, right? That has a direct impact on FinTech from the Digital Locker Authority. Anyway, so we went to Cape Town, and it turned out to be the handover between G20 presidency from India to Brazil. And I'm saying this because I realized that the global South, or the global majority, is very much underrepresented, especially in the area of FinTech, right? I was having, and I hope this is something that you can also help advocate, you know, get all these incredible voices from Nigeria to Africa, right? And one of the highlights, I would say, of 2023 for me, signing a partnership agreement with the Africa FinTech Network. And it opened up this 35-country ecosystem of super progressive leaders who are leaders in not just FinTech, in blockchain, in crypto. Nigeria is super underrated at close to 225 million people, right? We need to be taking Africa more seriously. Pakistan, for example, of the global south. I was just with the leaders in the Pakistan ecosystem in Hong Kong FinTech Week, and 250 million. 250 million. Can you imagine?
Yes,
People.
it's huge.
And then there's Indonesia. I call them almost the big three, right? In terms of our priorities. So we have Central Asia, we have for ASEAN, there's Indonesia, and then there's Africa and Nigeria. Then, of course, when you talk about the global south, how can we not talk about the importance of Brazil and also India in terms of our work stream? And yet, most of the narratives are still coming from the global north, right? I wish we can have I don't know if you do panels. I know it's a podcast, but it would be great to bring leaders in the global south, hear from our friends from the Middle East, and of course look at BRICS. BRICS just welcomed 6 other new members, and I was in Moscow actually, and I did a keynote with the chair of Grameen Bank, and essentially who did they welcome? Ethiopia, Egypt, of course, UAE, which is, we're looking at UAE to be the financial hub of the global south. And I was just there recently, and oh my God, Oriol, I don't know if you've been there recently, the excitement from blockchain, crypto to gold trading was just so thick, right? I think it's really the place to be.
No, I think so. And I think the whole narrative is changing. So I hope these countries that are part of the global south become much more relevant, because we are talking about huge countries, huge populations, very young populations as well, which means lots of opportunities. And well, without further ado, we need to put, unfortunately, an end to this episode.
Wow, was that already 20 minutes?
Yes,
See, so the time flies when you're
fast.
having.
So
Thank
fast.
you.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Amor, and I hope to be able to speak with you again in the future, because I'm sure that there are many more areas left to discuss.
Thank you. I think in closing, what I just like to say is we look forward to seeing you in any portal in ASEAN. There is no privilege gateway. We just wrapped up our Philippine FinTech Festival and our Digital Pilipinas Festival. Please, in 7 years, 40% of the global GDP is going to be in this region, that is ASEAN. And that is and that's a coming together of not just the 10 incredible countries in ASEAN, but more importantly, all the various dialogue and sectoral partners from Africa, UK, Canada, US, Russia, Japan, and so on and so forth. And we look forward to seeing you at least over the first half of the year, first quarter. Japan FinTech Festival, it's going for its 2nd run. We can't wait to see you all there. One of the important dialogue partners of ASEAN. We're excited about supporting the Vietnam FinTech Festival and the many other digital economies work that our partners are doing. And of course, we all hope to see you once again in the Philippines for the 3rd Philippine FinTech Festival in November. There's no privilege gateway in ASEAN. If you come in via Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, or any of our brothers and sisters here, it's good. As long as you find yourself in ASEAN in 2024, we're fine.
I'm going to be in the Japan FinTech Festival for sure, and hopefully in the Filipinas one in November. And
do it. No, let's do it. Let's do something in Japan, maybe for a gift.
Sure, no, I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting event. I'm looking forward to that, and I think all your remarks about the ASEAN region are actually very interesting, no? Because we are talking about many countries which share like a huge potential, and it's kind of common usually, to make the mistake of, whenever we talk about fintech, of thinking about just a few countries in the world, but there are many more countries which offer like many opportunities, and as we said before, countries with very big populations, very tech savvy, mobile savvy, with very young populations. So I think there are many opportunities there for both, external companies, external investors, but also opportunities for these countries to use to leverage technology to help their own populations to live much better and make sure that everyone is financially included, etc.
I look forward, most importantly, to give you a big hug when I see you in Tokyo.
Me too, me too. I'm looking forward to that. And as I said before, Amor, it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to speak with you. I'm sure that my listeners will have learned a lot listening to you from FinTech in ASEAN, Philippines. And I'm looking forward to hosting you again in the near future because I'm sure there are many more topics to discuss, especially for someone like you who's so active, such a pioneer in this space, who's always like in so many events and talking to so many people. So I'm sure you'll get many new topics to discuss and ideas very soon.
Encantada. Thank you so much. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. See you soon.
See you soon.
Mwah.
Thank you very much, Amor.
Thank you.
Thank you.